retrained myself to be more authentic to myself, because I think there was that whole crisis and corporate season where I was good at it and it never felt fully aligned.
Bill Coletti, crisis communications veteran. The man called in when billion-dollar companies had their worst day. He sold his firm, moved to Valencia, and started over, this time on his own terms. This is the conversation he wasn't ready to have until now.
I don't know that version of you, so I'd like to kind of go backwards a little bit.
The simple path is grew up in and around politics my whole life. My dad was the mayor of our small town. My mom was always a political operator, lobbyist, advocate for substance abuse issues. The notion that the public and politics was a noble endeavor was
Ingrained.
I've got some certain gifts and skills. Let's share them with people.
You ran political campaigns and you handle crisis management, which is, I don't know very many people that have the palate to handle moments like that.
I did crisis, and so typically the worst day of most corporations or the worst day of most leaders was the day I got called or the day I came in. But there are plenty of meeting rooms where I didn't really care what those people said because they were not material to the decision. I do think the limitations that I see, and they were limitations I had because I've been on this entrepreneurial journey myself, and building a crisis firm, I was unsure of what does my kind of content look like? How do I articulate that? So I was very reluctant and scared and said all kinds of things. Well, B2B is different than B2C. And
where did that come from as you were building this agency, experiencing some probably not so great moments?
So
Bill Coletti, welcome.
Justin, what a treat to be with you.
Absolute pleasure, man. I figured we had to fly to different countries.
Content.
Absolutely.
This is gone.
You decided to do a nice exit and then leave. So you're here in Europe now.
Absolutely. Just loving our life. Debbie and I are in Valencia, and it is better than we could have ever expected.
You have a lot to celebrate. It's been a great trip. I appreciate you boarded, more athletic version, and I skied like the old man. I had the sticks.
Yeah, like there's consequences. Dang.
I watched it happen.
Exactly.
I did. Yeah, I did. It looked good though. It did. You did look good. So it was a lot of fun.
Fast.
It happens quick.
Yeah. As things do in life.
I think I've skied twice in 15 years, and both of them have been with you.
I love it.
So it's been fun. This is a little bit prettier.
And your marked improvement. You made significant improvement year over year.
I'll take it. My body hurts less this time.
There you go.
The first time I was like, there's some rust falling on.
That's the sign of improvement.
I always knew not to you don't ever eat yellow snow, but I had some orange because of the rust that was coming off my knees and joints. But it was fun. So
that's awesome.
You've made a huge impact in my world, in my ecosystem. And I really appreciate your friendship. But more importantly, I think what's really cool is, who is Bill, right? I don't think a lot of people know you because you've done a really good job of making other people popular.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, sir.
That's in.
If you want,
No, we're good. No, thank you so much.
Can I trouble you for one? Could I have an Americano? No sugar. Thank you.
As we say, he's sweet enough.
Yes, exactly.
All right. For anybody that knows me knows that I'm a wuss in the weather and I don't like the cold, so I figured I'd tough it out with you.
I appreciate it.
It looks better, right? It definitely looks better in Cape Georgia. It's one thing. I love the water. So I grew up in Miami, born and raised on the water, and me navigating the water on a boat or anything, even on skis, versus snow, different version, is very, very different.
Absolutely.
I think it's funny because I could read the waterway so easily, and it is second nature. It's just kind of what's normal for me.
Absolutely.
And here I'm like, I need someone in front of me because I don't know what's going on and I can't see anything, and I just follow the trail. Well, if not, I hit a patch of ice and I look like a cartoon.
Right. So I talk about that so I teach sailing, and so I talk about it in the context of I can make you competent, but there's another rung to confidence. Okay, so you can competently ski. I've seen you competently ski, but maybe what you're expressing is that there's a difference between confidence, and then the other C is then there's craftsmanship above that. So that's a professional skier that's devoted the time and the talent to get there. And so I think teaching is about competence, just the basic, I can drive the car. Then there's confidence, driving, and then there's a way to do it at a craftsmanship.
Yeah, I think that Yeah, I have the competency. My body doesn't necessarily have the ability to do what I want to do anymore, but you know what to do. The confidence is a little different, and I'm probably one of those confident humans that I know, and I will say that.
But that in that domain,
In that environment, it goes from competency to oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. So, but it's a lot of fun. I enjoyed it.
yes.
Now you know your way around the water pretty well too. It's not just the mountain, you know.
Yeah.
You've had some little experience,
Yeah.
on a boat, sometimes at a sail.
Absolutely.
Tell me a little bit about your sailing experience.
So, my dad was a very competitive sailor in the 30s and 40s, before the war, and up in Booth Bay Harbor in Maine, and award-winning racer, and did quite a lot. And got married, life happened, and stopped. And so, kind of fast forward, I think almost 40 years, he had a little powerboat that he kind of enjoyed. But then my mom said, "Let's go take a charter." And so she chartered a 36-foot sailboat. My dad said, "I haven't touched a sailboat in probably 40 years.
Wow.
So that started that journey. So as a little kid, we had our little yacht club, and I did a little sailing experience, but was around my dad. So that then started in high school. And so I was always sailing with my dad all through high school. And that was all of our vacations. Those were all of our activities. And then I had that same thing where I sailed a little bit in college, and then life, 30 years go by, and I'm now driving a boat and now a boat captain, and really just kind of got back into it.
Yes. Excellent. Thank you very much. Grazie. Now, did you ever take the Miami to Maine trip that they do?
So I have done New York to Bermuda, Bermuda to the Virgin Islands a couple times as a delivery captain. And so the continuation of that story is, I was living in Bulgaria at the time, 10 years out of school, and found a boat to charter in Greece, and re-fell in love with it.
It's
And
addicting.
it is addictive.
Yeah.
Re-fell in love as an adult with a little bit more time, a little bit more money. And then life happens again, another big gap. And then my current wife and I, Debbie, bought a sailboat in the Caribbean. And so spent a lot of time sailing there. And then I got my captain's license. And so really it's a big part of my life. But saying it's not any longer. It's a less part of my head.
Sailing, that's an interesting thing for sure. Yeah, it's really cool. I think there's so many lessons from sailing. You know, one of my really good friends and mentors, Joe Craver, built a program called SAIL, for System for Advancing Internal Leaders. I love that. Yeah, Naval Academy sales, was on the SAIL team for the Naval Academy.
Yep.
And kind of took the lessons from, competitive sail to business. And then he's worked his way all the way up into, massively transforming, teams and leaders at large corporations. So SAIC and some other big ones as well. But what was really cool, he was a client, friend, mentor throughout the entire way. And then it kind of it just kind of goes all the way around.
Sure.
And I kind of went through that SAIL program through the coach client relationship.
Right.
And then I adopted it for our actual company, and we grew it. And it's something that I still run to this day. And I remember, when I had met you, I'm like, I was speaking language, and then I'm like, wait a second, you're picking out about it, and then you're really good at breadcrumb trails. You do that on purpose. So you started to drop a little nugget, and I started to, what do you know about that? Yeah. And then when you started to play on analogies with it too, when we were in the long car rides,
Absolutely.
I started going, wait a second, there's more to this guy, right? Because you're basically, I'm kind of trying to figure out what I'm doing. And I'm like, people like you, the way you hold yourself, they're not figuring out what they're doing. They know what they're doing, and they're figuring out when are they going to tell the world, and when is the world ready to hear what the next step is. And it's because I kind of met you in an interesting transition where you do leadership work and you do transformational coaching in so many different ways. And I still could you do that today. But it's largely because of, the exit, and you built some companies and sold those, and built some other companies and sold those. And I don't know that version of you. So I'd like to kind of go backwards a little bit and talk a little bit about the dirty word, even though we're in Europe, so we could say this, but the politics word.
Yeah.
You ran political campaigns, and you handle crisis management, which is, I don't know very many people that have the palate to handle moments like that. And you have an amazing ability to have both empathy for the environment and the people on both sides, with the ability to understand the science of psychology, but the art of communication to get that across. So where did that come from as you were building this agency and experiencing some probably not so great moments?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for that characterization. It's quite generous. So the simple path is grew up in and around politics my whole life. My dad was the mayor of our small town that I grew up in before I was born. And when I was born, he didn't run for re-election after my birth. My mom was always a political operator, lobbyist, advocate for substance abuse issues, quite prominent. And so the notion that the public and politics was a noble endeavor was
Ingrained.
That's ingrained. Did it introduce student government and just thought that electoral leadership and really less about ego and status and more about, I've got some certain gifts and skills. Let's share them with people. And so that's where that started.
Where were those gifts and skills that you identified them and then realized to apply them, even at the younger age?
Yes.
Right? Where were that?
Inclusion. So I vividly remember as a child at a dinner. I don't remember the exact dinner, but I had now fantasized it a little bit. It is a family dinner, and my mom and dad were always good about inviting guests and strangers, and always wanting everyone to feel included. That I think family at a holiday has history and code that they speak in.
Yeah.
And as an outsider, it'd be very easy to feel disenfranchised. And I remember as a kid, 12, 14, whatever the case may be, saying, I want to make sure that Tom's involved in this conversation because my brothers and sisters and I are doing that. And so I always felt a need for that. And as I've done some work and thinking about that, I think inclusion, hearing perspectives in a social context is critically important. So in campaigns, in politics, that's both art and science. So I really got really good at some of the technical side of it, of how we did direct mail and how we did early days of advertising. But it's really more about candidate management and inclusion, so that candidates are very scared people and their partners, often wives, create dynamics. And so I think that as I emerged as a campaign leader, it was really more focused on the individuals and this whole experience of inclusion. The pivot was we had a set of skill sets of campaigns for politics, campaigns for individuals, campaigns for causes. And our innovation for the firm that we started was campaigns for corporations. And my niche in that space was reputation and crisis, or public affairs, might call it. And so,
you have things that people are not just on the spotlight, but it's like they're always on, and they're always even if they're not on, the light's on them.
Correct. And my role was to be staff, was to be supportive in the candidate context, never really out front. And so we took those skill sets of running campaigns, moving public opinion, understanding what's coming around the corner, what's next, to predictive behavior. We did all of that and then applied that into a corporate context. And that built a firm and a career. And I honestly really sort of subordinated that innate desire of inclusion, because I did crisis. And so typically the worst day of most corporations, or the worst day of most leaders, was the day I got called or the day I came in.
Yeah.
And there's room for empathy, certainly, but there's not a lot of room or time in anything for too much collaboration. We need to make fast decisions. And so that patience that I try to demonstrate now, that you have commented on in my character, was subordinated for 15 years. Because it was fast decisions, fast strategy, high stakes, empathy, curiosity. But there are plenty of meeting rooms where I didn't really care what those people said because they were not material to the decision. And that's just a group dynamic. You walk into a room, you got a general counsel, a CEO, and a outside advisor. You need to get them all on board. The head of HR and other people downstream, while I'm seeing them in my periphery, are not important.
Sure.
That is a remarkable juxtaposition to where I started as a kid to where I am now, where I thrive and feel anxious at a dinner table where people aren't included and people aren't involved.
I think that in coaching, there's three things that I tell young coaches that you need to have and develop, and you should always be kind of going back to these three boxes in the skill component. So the first one is perspective. we have to be able to see things. So like a coaching eye is so important. And it comes from multiple different directions. He's the coach's eye, the athletic vantage point, really important because you got like the on-field play, you have the sideline view, or then you have the coach's box. And they all tell different stories of depth and reaction and angles. So developing the perspective to be able to see things that other people don't see is critical for that work, because the peripheral is a distraction, but it also is telling you things that are happening too. And you have to be aware of all of them, but not react to all of them. And then the second thing is attention. Like if you don't have the candidate or executive that made the decision to cause a problem, then they're not going to listen. So attention is driving that connection to then when you're clear with them, you could then move forward, which is the last thing, which is direction. And as a coach, like oftentimes in today's world, coaching is, they've basically butchered the word. I mean, the word coach to me, I hold very sacred into the idea of being a bridge and taking you from point A to point B, and protection, transformation with the address. Absolutely, because it's the ability to transfer, right? The coach cart and that whole model. And it's really important to kind of, take something from point A to point B. Safe, effective, speed, right? Making sure things stay intact, making sure you get to the correct destination. But at the same time, today, coaching has evolved into so many different things. But one of the things that has evolved into is, I believe you know the answer, so don't tell people what to do. Well, isn't the point to actually protect them from what they don't see? And then also with your experience and wisdom, allow them to say, here are your options and the potential outcomes based upon these patterns. Your ability to do that has not only mitigated probably financial risk, reputational risk, which I think is more important, but also legal risk. And when you play into all of those in a high stakes game, you have to hold a presence. You are a very calm individual. I've not seen you lose it. I don't know if there was a time in your life that you did. Was it?
Never been a yeller. Even through divorce and the normal life crises that every person. No, I've never been a yeller, and always tried to stay very rational and calm.
I'll be more than happy to share with you experience. And, I think we had some people that try to get loud in environments. I kind of chuckled. Yeah, like, what a little voice box.
Well, I want to go back to the coaching context because I love that, but I also want to stay here for a second, is that for me, if we go back to that origin story, yelling creates exclusion. Because if I'm yelling at you, I'm kind of pushing you away in the yelling or whatever the context is, or run a traffic light. But other people don't want to be in that space. So I love inclusion. I think I want people to feel involved, and there are boundaries of that. But I think that my affect is one of just inclusion, seeking inclusion, and yelling repels.
And I feel and this is not a direct correlation to yelling, but I believe that through adversity is the quickest way to truth.
Yes, if it is authentic.
I would hope.
Manufactured crises, manufactured urgency, in order to get that outcome, I don't think works. I don't think the receiver doesn't receive it the way you're intended.
Well, because the energy and the frequency of that with them isn't going to land. It's going to be a different mechanism in order to get them to open up about whatever the issue is.
Yes, exactly.
But I just found it fascinating that the way that you communicate is always from a place of how do we get to the end result that we want without as much damage.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of philosophies in sport and with athletes. It's like, hey, I got a dozen eggs. I'm just going to throw them on the wall. The ones that didn't break were good eggs. And that's how a lot of people coach.
Sure.
And they break a few eggs along the way. And I feel like, well, the good egg, it's not the egg's responsibility to hold, sturdiness if you're irresponsible with it.
Exactly.
And you have an amazing ability to not just hold a presence of being calm, but articulate a message where one person hears you, but 50 people are not offended.
Yeah.
Is that perspective coming from like seeing things as a kid, developing, like going back to like getting confidence? You talked about your C's and your levels. even in the student body side of things, were you like student body president? Did you have any sort of?
And that was a very inclusive. That was one of the reasons I ran for student government. Is there were some things I saw, and that was very communicative, collaborative. There was never really our high school student government was weak, but there was really no body, and so we convened a body.
But you wanted somebody to hold a voice that could help everybody else.
It could help everybody else. That could help. And then through campaigns, through crisis work, as I said, I left all of that. And so there are many, many memories of meetings, of high stakes situations where I had to disenfranchise people. And you have to say, well, we're not doing that now. We're doing this now in a very directive, in a very clear way. Through the course of just personal work and finding my own personal satisfaction, a divorce, a motorcycle accident, and selling a business, I kind of was like, that doesn't serve me anymore.
They all sound like crisis management, by the way.
Yeah, they were, but they don't serve me in the way in this domain. So, and maybe, and you and I have talked about this in the past, and maybe I over-index too much and could be a little bit more directive in my coaching and in my counsel. But I fundamentally believe that this is not my life. This is their life. And if I can shine lights on things and illuminate things, they got to figure it out themselves. I have plenty of experience in saying, no, we're doing this. And if you don't do this, here are the consequences. And just standing there in a very kind of proud and confident way, this is how it's going to go down. We keep talking about it, but this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen.
How do you notice those tipping points, right? Because at some point there's a threshold for that conversation shift.
Yeah. Well, in that crisis domain, it's just experience. Been there, done that. Pattern. That was all about pattern recognition. Is that I knew the one thing I knew was I knew how the public and vis-a-vis the media would react to a given situation. I knew storylines of where things were going to go, and we need to try to get in that line or change that law. And the route is what we need to do. So I had a lot of clarity and confidence of what I knew was going to happen next. I don't have that as much in entrepreneurial coaching. I know what they could do next. I don't really know what they should do next, but it's up to them to make that next move. And my patience, which I didn't have much previously, my patience is they don't get it on the first crack, maybe they'll get it on the second. If they don't get it on the second, maybe they'll get it on the third. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. That I get fatigued by that at some point, but I'm okay with that. From rapid decisions, bit of input, often wrong, never in doubt. A little bit of input, decision. Now it feels like my bucket is a bit bigger that I won't fill before I make decisions.
Do you feel like you have this space to take on a lot of those things because of where you are today? Like you sold multiple businesses now. This last exit is probably one that's moved you not just to a new location, which is pretty fascinating, by the way. I think that's amazing. And you weren't in a bad place to begin with, but where you are now is like, it's like kind of like you get to write an old storybook, which is really cool. Yeah, well, it is really nice. But do you feel like now the space that you're in, like you actually have the almost mental and emotional capacity to be like, wait a second, I can have such diversity to the businesses, the niches, the experiences, because at the end of the day, it's a leadership.
Yeah. And it was, I have retrained myself to be more authentic to myself, because I think there was that whole crisis and corporate season where I was good at it. But it never felt fully along because of that origin story around wanting guests at the table to feel involved. I have this sort of hop skip, and I should measure it, but it's measured in decades, and then just 1, 2, or 3, but it's measured in a chunk to now where that sort of drives me more than anything.
That's cool. I think what's fascinating about you is the ability to have range. Right, like you have great range, whether it be sailing to skiing, but from the crisis side of political campaigns to business, like change management to actually organizational, like we're going to reorg, and then that's a crisis. To an executive makes a bad call, and then we have like an actual huge crisis at the end that everyone's like very acute moment. We have to address it. And some of them, they're long drawn out. Change management and organizational change is sometimes very painful. They don't want to rip the Band-Aid off. They do it really, really slow.
Absolutely.
Now with with entrepreneurs, business owners, there's so many different niches that they're in. And this is from my experience of working with you, is the clarity that you give people to say, okay, I don't know what my fifth move is, but I know my next move. Yeah. And then you like, okay, you take that action and you talk about something that we were just bringing up just the other day is the, kind of like the power of knowing versus the like power of doing. And we separate these things. And like, there is a gap that we call there. And my thing that I have a lot of pride in with as a coach is to close the gap. But there's definitely these two issues where someone knows something, but they're not doing anything. My philosophy is that the learning is in the action, not in the knowing, because the perspective is different.
I agree.
So how do you get people to actually start moving when they get really, really stuck?
Yeah. For them to understand the consequences of their decisions, not what I think they're missing out on, not what other entrepreneurs are doing, but for them. This is by them not making that step and in this context, we're talking about becoming a key person of influence. By them not taking that step, let's acknowledge that you're missing out. You are leaving chips on the table if you don't take those steps. I don't need to cajole them, demand that they do it. I can cast a vision that, hey, maybe that's a little fuzzy to get them to the doing, but I think that doing has to be self-motivated or it's not sustainable. And it's not my job to certainly not berate anybody or cajole anybody. I think it's for me to say, what is your next best step? Let's do that. Tell me how it went. Then let's do another one and tell me how that went. And then the gaps start getting longer and longer over time. There's some people you don't need to do that with. Some people you just say, there's the hill, go take it, and they take it. And other people are attracted to them. But I am very empathetic for the entrepreneur that is scared.
Why?
I think it goes back to inclusion. I want them to feel included at the table of successful entrepreneurs.
But the very nature of entrepreneurship and business is exclusion. It's doing the 1% that not anyone is doing. And at that 1%, that's taking that journey of self-employed and setting their own vision and recreating something out of nothing because it didn't exist before. Very seldomly are we creating a thing that was already there in the way we're doing it. The product might be there, the service might be there, but you're doing it in your way, and it's the first time you're doing it. Normally, when you go into this venture, even if you've worked for someone else, apprentice, and then built your way up, at the end of the day, that collapsed some time. But now when you're on your own, you get on a little bit of an island, and people are scared. But at the very nature of it is actually exclusion. Are you just trying to say, are you trying to basically like, wait a second, there's a bunch of other people that have been through this before, and then you're bringing them together? So you're like almost setting the table.
Absolutely setting the table. And I believe in abundance. And so when we use percentages, and we talk about the 1%, that means there's the 99 as well.
Correct.
And I want to make that 1% pie piece as big as possible. And I think 1% is not necessarily a mathematical construct. It's more sort of an emotional construct of the 1%. And no, I want people in that table. I want people to be at the table of success that I've had. I want people to be at the table of success of their own making that they want. But it's not for me to demand. It's not for me to demand. It's for them to. And one of the coaching questions I use is, do you want help with that? Do you want help with it? Hell yeah, I want help with it. If you want help with it, well then let's go do that. Let's go do that. It's not. Everybody doesn't have to be as big as they can be. And there's lifestyle businesses that you can have rich lives. I think there are people that struggle in the doing. Back to that point about the doing. My job is to help them to shrink that gap in the way that I do it, which is step by step, and by them to see a better possible outcome.
Yeah.
And then lastly, to identify what's the worst that could happen.
Yeah.
I don't want to be on stage because I get scared. That's a common refrain that you get from people. Well, what's the worst that could happen?
You suck. And guess what? The next time you do it, you'll do better.
And you'll get better. You'll get better.
And then all of a sudden, one day you wake up and you go, oh my God, I rocked that.
But people can kind of fantasize that, oh my God, my life would come to an end. Or you'll do a bad speech, or you'll fumble a podcast, or you'll lose a pitch, or you'll lose a high talented person on your team. none of these things are really that bad. And maybe that comes from the prices, where I've seen the arc of billion-dollar companies change. And that shit matters. Yeah, it matters. Some of these decisions don't.
Yeah, and I think that's what's really cool. Like you setting the table, I think there's different ways. Like you could buy a ticket to the room, right? And you just watch. Yeah, you could be invited to the room, right? Or you could set the table. And I think that you do really well in all three of those domains because you know how to navigate what people need at different moments. And you're very good at basically saying, hey, it's not my show. Or wait a second, I got the baton and now it's I'm the second leg. My job is to actually get some separation between team 1 and team 2. And you do a really good job of that as well.
And because we have talked about that and I have processed that in talking about that. There's an inherent, my judgment of what you said, there's an inherent perception that I think you have in the softness and infinite capacity of curiosity and infinite capacity of empathy. And
I find you to be very intellectually curious as a very mature individual and seen that way.
right.
The softness comes from my belief as a coach of anything that I see, I've either coached or allowed to happen. And I don't know which one's worse. Ignorance, not knowing, or negligence, knowing and not saying anything. And I have spent enough time with you to know that in situations that have come up, I've watched you know what the answer is, but you're letting them come to that.
Absolutely. And that's the patience.
And I would say, big B.
Yeah. And I believe, I don't have any empirical data on this, but I believe the stickiness of that decision so that it can be replicated is best if someone finds it themselves as opposed to me wayfind for them.
I think that the first step, though, when someone doesn't have confidence, because they want that from me, is I need the confidence to get going. It's like, no, you don't. You need the courage to start. And then what happens is over the experience that you go through, you'll look back and then you have the confidence because of what's been shown. And I think that sometimes if you could just kind of push them over a little bit and they give them a little bit of the courage, because I tell people that, like, hey, if you have a lot of anxiety before the thing and you don't have confidence, good, because dumb people don't have anxiety.
Right.
Smart people have anxiety because it's overactivity of the brain.
Because they're conscious of what could happen.
Exactly. And they start thinking of multiple opportunities. Well, dumb people don't think of multiple opportunities. That's how they get in trouble.
Exactly.
So you should be grateful that God gave you anxiety.
Absolutely.
So just have a little courage, get it going, and then you'll get it right.
Right. And push versus point is what I'm thinking. And so
I'm on which day.
Oh yeah, exactly. And I think I think there are the right people for the right people. And I've had coaching clients say, yeah, I'm just looking forward to another ass kicking. And I'm like, well, I don't really do that. And maybe if you feel like that, they feel like it, that's your thing. But I know that's not what I do.
I don't think people work with me and look forward to that.
Yeah. And I've got somebody here this week that mentioned, I want to get on the phone. I really want you to dig in on me. And if that's their perception of it, it's not my perception. It's not the way I do it. It's not pushing it further. But there is a path. Let's take each individual step of the path and de-risk or de-fear. It's still scary, but let's de-risk it, as opposed to we're at the top of the tower and I'm just going to push and trust fall and you're going to be okay. That works for some people. It's just not my thing.
I like to see the tracks, though. I want to see that, like, can I follow someone that's already done it?
It's making, yes. Yeah, I learned that through that point, and that's the point, though. I know what to point at because I had some experience. But the pushing, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to them.
Or it's not sustainable.
No.
It's exhausting. Normally when you push, you get resistance. So I see that. I learned one of the benefits of growing up in the water, you learn how to tie a lot of knots.
Exactly.
And, a good knot, I always wanted my dad to teach me how to tie knots, and I used to sit there and teach me. Like, hey, would you teach me? And he's like, there's a book right there. The book's basically what you wrote. So can you be the one who teaches me? It made me a lot easier. And I was young. Sure. And, I want to learn how to tie a knot. And so what does he do? He just throws me a bunch of rope. So I'm over here doing it's like, and I'm like trying to figure this thing out. And he's like, that's a lot of knot. What type of knot? That's a lot of knot.
Yeah.
And it's just one knot after another knot, another knot. And then it was learning what a good knot is the least amount of loops,
Friction.
with the right amount of tension and slack at the right points to do its job.
Absolutely.
And a good knot has the least amount of
Bends or bites or I guess exactly.
and what happens when you have the shown patience and you hold a state like an energy state, what you end up doing is basically you remove people from taking bad action because people just do things like in my world too. Sometimes is they'll just do things because they got to be busy, so that they're just doing a lot of things and they tie a lot of knot. The knot's tight, it's secure, but good luck getting it off.
Absolutely.
And
Irreversible.
Exactly. So I would prefer to have the right knot. And I think that you do that very eloquently, eloquently with the way that you coach, with the way that you show up because of the presence. And I believe that environment always wins. I'm talking about setting a table. You need to have the skill, right? So you need to have the ability, skill to potentially coach the person that has the talent and desire. There needs to be the will, like their desire, their drive. You need to have the will to want to see that person succeed. And there needs to be the circumstances where you're in a position, right? Because if you're not gifted that opportunity to coach, then what's the point? You're not there. And they need to have the circumstances to demonstrate the skill and the will and the desire to get better. So I start looking at that, and that's how you create a high performance team is you create an environment that always wins because the fish are not sick. The water's dirty. So when you get in there like, oh, it's not working, it's like, wait a second. There's something wrong with the environment. I think the environment's driven by energy. I think that you control that. But one thing I will 100% credit to you is when we pull back the layer, it's a mindset issue. Most of the time, most people don't want to talk about it because it is foo-foo. I'm an energy guy, but I'm the big tough guy in some ways. But it's really that there's some sort of a mental block around why they can't do this or why they wouldn't take this action step. That mental block, where do you start?
Yeah. So just to illustrate that point, so I believe that all challenges in entrepreneurship are time, money, or mindset. I think you can distill just about everything into.
And I can write a check and it's done.
Exactly. Right. And
I can work hard enough on it and
figure it out.
grind my way through it.
Exactly. Or I can gut it out or take the courage or take the leap that needs to be taken in order to do that.
And I would call that people want to do it better and they grind through the process because they have time. Other people want to do it different.
Yeah.
And the difference starts with the mindset.
Absolutely. And so I do think the limitations that I see, and they were limitations I had because I've been on this entrepreneurial journey myself and was unsure building a crisis firm. I was unsure of what does my kind of content look like? How do I articulate that? So I was very reluctant and scared and said all kinds of things. Well, B2B is different than B2C, and I'm not selling widgets on Instagram. And then all these kind of things that I told myself, I said, well, if I get out front, are my law firm referrals, are they going to say, who's this guy way out front and different things like that. So but got over it and found a path that was respectful to my clients, but also illuminating to those that were interested. But it's not easy and it takes work. You can't just jump in cavalierly. And so that's where I think the mindset work takes patience because that's the deeper of those three. It's the deepest one of the greatest challenges, and it takes patience. And I'm at a place where I can give patience.
Yeah, exactly. And patience and perspective with it too. And I think that's really important. So I would look at like the next step for people is the awareness gap.
Yeah.
And there's the awareness of like your values and your belief systems. It's like, how do those kind of come together? And oftentimes the biggest issue, it's like the Johari window. I don't know what I don't know, but I also don't know how I'm perceived or seen.
Yep.
And the more awareness one has, right, and the more alignment they are to their values and their beliefs, then the more their story will be aligned.
Yes.
Because they cannot tell a story, in my opinion, that lands at the frequency or energy level, or even at the marketing psychology level, if they themselves are not authentic with the alignment.
Yes.
So I truly believe that it's an awareness gap. And then there's the story gap. It's like, you got to know who you are, and then you need to know how you're being perceived and how you need to articulate that message so it makes sense.
And that takes time.
And that practice.
And it takes practice, but it takes time, it takes practice. But at the end of that, what you just described is an inherent confidence that makes the scary things less scary. but it's a process. It takes time to do what you just described in a handful of words. It could take people weeks or months or years. It'll evolve to work on that. And that's, to me, that's a win. And it goes back to what we were chatting about competence and confidence. We can tell everybody what to do on how to digital market and how to become a key person of influence. That's competence, or we sometimes call it knowing. Confidence is the shrinking of the gap to actually get to the doing, the action, the result, the things that matter. I mean, there's input, but then what really matters is the action on anything that we be. Having the patience as a coach to help people get there, I'm absolutely fine with that. Now, maybe I have the luxury of time, but I think just even in the conversations we've had, you've got high-performing athletes and entrepreneurs that work with you and get the authentic, real you. And that may be a little bit different than me. Maybe it's more demanding, or maybe it's more
Better looking is what he went to.
yeah, by pushing or things like that. But you have different patience for your kid. You have different patience for your wife. You have different patience for your family. And so I just think that I'm channeling that energy as opposed to the pushing energy.
Yeah.
Is that I want my kids, I want my wife, I want my intimate friends to come along with me. And if I need to slow down, that's okay. I'm okay slowing down.
That's who oftentimes they're trying the fastest athletes in the world. I tell them slow down and speed up.
Absolutely. Because all the big.
Well, if the axle's out of alignment, right, you could break some things. Says, well, if at point of contact, if you don't have a structured biomechanical truth, the injury rate goes through the roof. Absolutely.
And sturdy. I think that would be sturdy.
Absolutely. Yeah, because force factors, and I could get into the science part, but at the end of the day, like you're out leveraged.
Yes.
When you're out of alignment. And I look at it for me, I think my dissonance with people and or myself in that story gap is when I look at somebody and their actions, daily actions, which develop their habits and how they show up, are not aligned with the ambition that they said they had.
Absolutely.
So I want something. Bill, I need your help. Coach Bill, help me. I'm ready. But my daily actions are disconnected.
Totally.
That frustrates me as a coach.
Sure. Yes. So let's not work on the goal. The goal seems relatively clear. Let's work on the preceding factors, and let's tackle those one by one so that you can now, with fewer speed bumps and hurdles, to actually achieve that goal. So let's go backwards to figure out what are those things that it's in outer alignment and really the way we show up. You were talking about high-performing teams, and I was waiting for you to say the leader, but I think that's really critical as well. A high-performing team has a leader, and if they don't have their act together, they'll never get that team. And we can give them lots of vocabulary, and we can give them a whistle and a clipboard, and they can yell and scream. But if they don't have their self together authentically, they'll never yield outcomes.
So there's all these statements that are interesting, like the fish rod's at the head. That's not true. The fish rod's at the tail. You ever watch fish rod? But it dies at the head.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's first dead at the brain level.
Sure.
But it rots at the tail.
Yeah.
And what you'll find is it's the leader not leading. And then what happens is everything else underneath it starts to disintegrate.
Yeah.
And then people don't identify the leader until later because the leader's stable. The head's still there.
Exactly.
But all of this stuff is gone.
Yeah.
And all of the things have basically chewed away at it. And the only thing that's left is bone.
Absolutely.
So the structure's still there, but there's no what I call character, which is the culture of this. Absolutely. It's the flesh and the flesh. Yeah, it's the meat.
Absolutely.
But yeah, the idea that the fish rots at the head is a concept that it is rotting from leadership's lack of presence. It's physical lack of clarity, I may say. Yeah. And communicating that too.
Absolutely.
So, but it dies at the head. And I would call that moment of death in an analogy standpoint. I'm like, are you not repeating yourself? Because as a young coach, Cav, right, the young version of me, I used to truly believe that I'm responsible for what I say, not for what you understand. I used to believe that. Yeah. And I'm responsible for what I say. If you can't figure it out, that's up to you. Right?
Yeah.
And I've learned that not only am I not responsible for what I say, I am responsible for your action afterwards at the responsibility level, which demonstrates how clear I was and how well you understand that.
Right. Let me try to say that back if I understand it. I think it's my responsibility, and this goes to patience, to find the best way for you to understand it. And pick the analogy that we want to talk about. Let's start talking about fishes. If we need to say, well, no, a fish doesn't rot from the head, it rots from the tail, and the shark parable you just gave makes perfect sense. If that doesn't land, I don't just repeat the same story again. I need
No,
a
it's a concept.
I need to run a different new way to
Absolutely.
say that.
Yeah.
And that's, I see in a lot of entrepreneurial startups, I see in a lot of coaching, here's everything you need to know, just go do it. And if you're too dumb to figure it out, that's on you. I think that's it. That's a pity.
I think that's irresponsible.
It's irresponsible to your IP.
Yeah, I don't think that, I agree about the pity part. I think that the thing that frustrates me is that's irresponsible as the coach, because you're removing yourself from the one job that you have is to help with the guidance or create guardrails so they don't have all of this shit to go through.
Absolutely.
Your job is to actually, strategy is
Make
about
clear.
removing things, not adding things. So you could go through this thing that we have all of this, but we really want to know, like, okay, where do we start?
But there are plenty of coaching systems, programs, masterminds, whatever you want to call it, in this creator economy that we're in right now. And I've had coaches say this to me. It's all right there in the book. Just do what I say. Do the program, do the work, do the weekly, whatever. It's all right there. And there are things, mostly mindset, that I think get overlooked. And if your business model supports telling to your customer, screw it, just do the work, that's fine. Maybe you can scale, but I just think there is a chunk.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the 80 or the 20. I'm really not sure if it's the 80 or the 20. But there are folks that want to ask questions, that are curious, that want to try to shape it for them. I think they can go crazy doing that. But I do think there's room for people to have just some mindset. Let's have a conversation about it.
Where I tend to think that that's okay, like it's just there, go and do it, is when there's no skin in the game. So like for like the buyer, right? Like they're not buying it, it's free, right?
Yeah.
So because that's by their choice. Because I truly believe there is skin in the game. So if they're buying, then you have an obligation.
Correct.
Right? And part of that obligation is meet somebody where they are, which is, in my opinion, the definition of coaching, right? It's like, how do you close the gap? The next thing that I kind of think about is, do I want to run or lead a business that is so unemotional that they could just pick it up and just do it? No. Sell a product, sell coffee. That's great. But even coffee that's good wants to tell a story. Because the story aligns you with how you identify it somewhere.
Right.
And I think that that's important, whether it is meaningful or not to the person, because they maybe just want the money. But I don't necessarily want to run a business that I don't necessarily have a lot of like genuine care for the impact that I love that. That's great.
So talk to me about, in this context, about your thoughts around enabling. Enabling is gets a bad rap as a word. I think people use enable in a bad way. There's it's used in very positive ways, but I think it's in this context we're saying, or we're just letting people wallow.
Not used to the
We're just letting people wallow. So talk a little bit about that in this context of what you observe in me, of this patience and capacity for reframing for seeking understanding. When does that become enablement and wallowing?
So whereas an aggressive individual would say the definition of insanity, right, is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, right? It's one brilliant philosopher that said that, and then it gets replicated by 1,000 other people. So figure out a way to give the right person credit.
Right.
And I would say that addiction behavior is baked into all of us at some level. We just don't know what our vices are. And our job is to protect ourselves from those vices. And enablement is when you are creating addiction behavior that serves you and disserves them. And I think that's where there's an addiction problem.
Well, that's a coach's problem.
Which is a coaching problem. It is also, from an enablement standpoint, it's also what you see in, addicts, where like the family enables the drunk or, the gambler or, whatever they are, is like drugs, violence, repeated behaviors around things that we know are wrong, that you were you are born with the ability to choose, and you know right from wrong.
Correct.
And me enabling you is creating the habit trigger
Right.
for you or leaving it out there. And I grew up in a very like trustworthy home where my parents were very honest with you. And you suck today at this, you know. And I would sit at the dinner table as a kid, and my parents, my dad's a good cook, and it's like, how did you like it? He would ask me, and I would be the only one that'd be okay to say it, you know. And it's not good enough for you, and I'm like, you taught me to have good taste,
Right.
you know.
Great.
So, but that level of like trust on a consistent basis allowed me to have a general understanding of what I was good at, and not be like just disassociated from reality, which is the awareness gap. Right. And the enablement comes from, in my opinion, when you're not fully, you know, with people, you're not openly direct trust-wise. And that happens to basically, well, like, we can't tell him this because he's not mentally strong to handle that. And they start to make excuses for their enabled behavior.
Right.
And then they start to make excuses for wanting to keep people small. Moms wanting to hold on too tight. Dads want to say like, well, I'm tough on them because of this reason. Like, that is your reason. That's not for them. That's for you. So in the entrepreneurial world, I look at it as entrepreneurs are very much addicted to the stories that they have.
The story they tell themselves.
And normally that story is one that starts at childhood, and then they kind of move it into different environments, and they carry it with them, and it just doesn't show up in different ways. And oftentimes what happens is an entrepreneur, when things are going well, they create a problem, therefore to be the one that jumps in and fixes it so that they feel validated that they are now needed.
Right.
And everyone's like, well, I would love that life. I wish I don't have to rely on all these people. They just don't do this. I got to do this. I got to jump in. It's like, wait a second. At some point, you have to let them fail, then hold them accountable. You don't let them fail.
It only works with the accountability.
Yes. You don't let them fail and then be like, well, you're dumb.
Right.
You protect that. But then you also like say, hey, wait a second. Was this not clear? Was my expectations not clear? Was the work not clear? Because at the end of the day, you have inputs, process, and outputs.
Absolutely.
And as a leader, entrepreneur, coach, dad, whoever you are talking to, your job is actually to manage outcomes.
Yes.
But the output is part of the system and environment that you're creating. And what you're trying to find is when the outputs, all right, are consistent with the outcomes that you want. And when they become predictable, throw fuel on the fire, press the gas and go. So I look at that, and oftentimes people complain because they are saying, well, I don't like the outcome. But you had no output.
Yes.
There's no process. There's no input.
No.
And what you're doing,
Making it up as you go along.
what you're doing is you're enabling them to not actually get through the work.
Right.
And you see this in, like I said, I see this all the time in addiction behavior. I see a lot of the time in like basically, you know, the like parents being too close. People say, I hate the word helicopter parent. I love the helicopter parent. And I'm a coach.
Sure.
And everyone thinks I'm crazy.
Right.
You can't stand when parents jump in. I said, the definition of a helicopter parent, at the analogy that you understand, is the same analogy that the fish rots at the head.
Yeah.
A helicopter has the ability to go up and down, but always have the sight of where they are.
Yeah, that's great.
And if you have to go enough down to drop your kid a ladder that he could just jump on, then you should be able to do that. But you should also be able to get high enough to where you know that he's still safe.
But that's where it breaks down, is the altitude.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want you to be able to have the confidence as a parent or as a leader to elevate so that mid-management or individual contributors or leaders or marketers or people in your business could do their job without oversight, with the feel of it, but there's actual system oversight.
Sure.
Because both levels have confidence.
I love that. Back to the linkage that I'm making between patience as a coach and enablement. I think there's margin in space, and so it goes back to the pointing versus the pushing. That kind of links together. My hunch is our respective margins have a little bit of a different size.
Part of that is wisdom. You're older than I am.
It is, right?
I would imagine that you got to think about that a little bit, and you say like, this isn't as bad as you think.
Right. Exactly.
The other aspect of it is I do not choose someone's goal. So as a coach, like, how is Thomas going to get into sports, or what is he into? He's like, he's into Roblox and Pokemon.
Exactly.
And like, but are you okay with that? It's my son. Of course. Like, do you want to play the piano, or do you want to, play soccer? That, like, to me, my parents, like, did the same thing. They let me, like, whatever I was into, but then it was a matter of my commitment.
But if you had an entrepreneurial client that you saw making errors, or not error, that's judgment. You saw an entrepreneur not maximizing their potential or not acting on missed opportunities,
Lack of perspective.
You'd have different patience for that entrepreneur than you do for your son.
No, because they came to me and they said they have a specific goal.
Yeah, so let's get there.
And that's where my issue is that there's a gap between their action and their ambition that they're telling me.
Right.
And that to me is the disconnect.
Right.
So where I'm saying is, I had a situation once. I had a coach, and I put together a 5-year goal. Right, like, you do your 3 to 5 year goals, and business was in a really good place, right? Like, lifestyle business was in a good place. I was in a really good environment, and something happened. Crisis management, not my fault at all. It happened, and I didn't listen to any of the yous of the world, and probably, it just didn't align with my character and integrity. And I was just like, here's the information. This is what's going on. Probably the worst thing you could do. I just knew that kind of, not necessarily the truth will set you free, but to me, I didn't know if I could live with myself if I try to hide. So I had to show up in those environments, and that's what I did. It was probably not the best thing, but it's what I knew to do. Okay. And I will tell you, there's anxiety that was developed in me during the moment because I had never experienced that.
Right.
I thought that my outcomes I was in control over, and I had said someone else control an outcome for me. That was like, whoa.
It yielded a negative.
For me, yeah. So I had this 5-year goal, and things were going great. And I said, hey, we got to do this. And we did it in 3 months. But that was like hey, I'm not asking for a favor, but how do we actually take this accordion of work and go, right? Because it had to happen. And guess what happened? It had to happen. But it was my goal, as I desire.
Right.
And I just basically said, hey, we're not moving the goalpost. We are just going to go as hard as we can.
And I think that's great. And I think when situations dictate that, the way I like to think of a coach, we're going to lean in we're going to move fast on that. But if someone doesn't have that clarity, doesn't have that ability, I need to kind of wait for them to clarify it, help them clarify it so they can kind of catch up.
I challenge questions on people's based on their ambitions and goals. So they say, I want to achieve this. And I would say, okay, what delta are you trying to actually solve for? Because, for instance, they're like, well, I want this much money. And I go, okay, well, I want this. And I go, well, like, is it going to give you the car? Is it going to give you the boat? Is it going to give you the jewelry? Is it going to give you the travel, the lifestyle? What is the difference, right? Because is your lifestyle gap that you don't have $300,000 difference? Or is it 30? Or is it 3 million, right? Because that's the gap that you're solving for. But they're like, well, I want 10. Well, like, does 10 solve your problem? Because anything after that, what is it for? So I would look at that as the primary driver. And then the second thing that I would look at, a part of that is like timeline, because the timeline dictates how much you have to have the action, and not everyone has the palate for that. And the patience. I would look at capacity of what's healthy and sustainable, because you might be able to, like, I think life is a series of sprints, and you could go fast, but you can't go fast forever. And I even have to slow down. Like, this is the least I've worked in months.
See, past couple of days?
Yeah. Like, what the hell am I doing skiing? I got work to do. Sure. But the work that we're trying to do actually gets done on the ski lift, and the work gets done in the dinner, which I'm good at that stuff, right? So I get it. But there's a lot of times in my head, I think, God, it would be really nice just to have an extra 4 hours to just rip through some stuff that I know would be productive.
And you've probably had the same conversation over and over with some people. It would have been easier if you just had it once and they went and did something.
Absolutely.
So I'm just like, I'll have it again. Let's find a different way.
And I think that I just would like people to understand that you have to actually, in order to close the gap from where you are versus where you want to be, it does start with the awareness, and then I think it ends with the mental.
Absolutely.
And the reason why I say that is because the reality of the mental gap is that you can't actually start it.
Right.
But if you start with the like, hey, let's fit your mentality, and then we get into awareness, and then we get into your story, right? And then we get into like your model, and then we get into your competition, and we start to really, you're getting better from the mental framework where you started from.
Yes.
But if you actually figure out all these other things and close these gaps, and then you say, okay, wait a second, why are these things not actually collapsing at the rate that you like, or you're not taking the leaps that you want? It's because it's always going back to your mindset. So you bookend your mental work.
Yeah.
Because mental and psychological work is not just an accelerator, it's an integrator. It's in everything you do.
Which I then think go through that process you just described, and output is obviously the action or the success of the program or whatever, but it's also internal confidence in that person that walked through that gauntlet that you was describing.
Yeah, so I love that. It's been a frickin' pleasure battling with you from a patient standpoint, because I know, come on, I know you know the answer. I heard you say it 4 days ago.
Yeah, totally. But I want the other person to say it. I don't want to say it. I want the other person.
And I think it's so fun to watch the good count, the bad count. But I also think what's really exciting is the fact that I'm learning through the coaching.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate it. And it's the permission to coach with you and for you and from you. I'm really excited about the next venture as you go through this part of your life. I talk about like going through your 2 mountains. Right? Our first mountain of like German performance for the athletes.
Climbing my second mountain.
For athletes, it's the Olympics or championship or whatever it may be, world title. And then they go see this valley of despair. Then they want that kind of second mountain. You've done some of this.
I have. I'm excited. I love the climb that I'm in right now on the second mountain, and I love it.
And I think that's the goal is like live your tellus, like your higher purpose.
Absolutely. And I think it goes back to that origin story. It is one about wanting people to feel included so that they can be the best, the best version of themselves. And if I can be a little bit a part of that, and if that's entrepreneurial success and wealth and lifestyle, awesome. Or if it's just getting up on stage.
Yeah. Well, I think you totally embody the ability to actually develop SAIL, like systems for advancing internal.
Yeah, beautiful.
Who you are in every which way is kind of awesome. You talk about environment. We talk about environment always wins. We talk about all of these little cool frameworks. I think what's really cool is the energy and the mental framework that you almost give to people to look at.
I appreciate that. Thank you. To have you recognize that is very impactful.
Well, it's helped me.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
So, and I've seen the outputs of the actions, and I've seen outcomes that I like.
Right.
And I would like to be
at a different base.
Yeah. Like it move fast. All right, buddy. You're the best. You're the best. Appreciate it.